Hello, colleagues, and welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where I'm delighted to be joined today by Rosie Ferguson, who is the Chief Executive of the very wonderful House of St Barnabas, a fantastic charity that I know a lot of housing leaders have supported over the years, helping homeless people into employment. And obviously, this has been a really, really difficult time for a lot of charities, but particularly one helping homeless people into employment. And that's what I wanted to sort of explore a little bit today with Rosie about, how the business is responding to that. But Rosie, for those viewers who don't know you, do you want to sort of just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Rosie, and I have been passionate about social change from quite an early age. I think I had a kind of instinctive sense of injustice, and I kind of was really grateful for the opportunities I had to lead and grow from quite a young age, and through kind of youth work opportunities, and um, always had an instinct that actually supporting other people to be able to have the opportunities that help them be the best they can be is was my kind of calling, if you like. So I've always worked in the voluntary sector, started out in youth work working with young people, and then went on to be chief executive of London Youth. And then I went to work at Gingerbread, the national single parent charity, as chief exec there. And then last September came to be chief executive here at the fabulous House of St Barnabas, and I am actually in the drawing room at the house today. So I'm really passionate about leadership and what makes good leadership in the 21st century. I'm chair of ACIVO, the Association of Chief Execs of Charities, which is a great opportunity to work with the team there to really think about how do we best support leaders in the social sector to deal with the challenges that are thrown with them, even more so in the last few months. And I'm also an improviser, so I do comedy improv. So that in normal times I would be performing kind of once a week. So that also probably informs my leadership style in some positive ways, I hope.
A very topical question around this. I mean, the whole COVID crisis, how's that sort of caused you to sort of stop and reflect about your leadership style?
I mean, it's interesting. I think in terms of my leadership style through this, I would say it's been really about bringing in as many people into the thinking and the decision making as possible. It's odd, given that I haven't seen most of my team for the last 3 months, I've never felt closer to a team. And I think what we've done is really, so we've had 11 o'clock meetings every day that aren't about work and that are just every kind of and because most of our team are furloughed, we've got quite a small team of us working, and it's really intense. And I think the everybody's role is really critical, because we've absolutely got a core team working. And so the opportunity to lead, I think there's something about Teams, leading on Teams and Zoom or whatever format you're using, that having everybody equal size on a screen is a real leveler. So I think for me, it's given me an opportunity, and also the humanity that comes with people just being in their living rooms, and with everybody being on a kind of personal emotional roller coaster, particularly at the beginning, and how you kind of lead a team of people who cannot help but display vulnerability just from the reality of where they are. Nobody can kind of put their work mask on, and I think both as a leader and leading people through that context, it's been, I've learned a lot about. I mean, I think I hope I've always been a kind of authentic and grounded leader, but I think that's really had to accelerate to lead through this context.
And that's fantastic to hear that, because it's not for everybody, sort of, doing all of the sort of virtual sort of contact and that. And particularly, you work sort of in the hospitality business within sort of the House of St Barnabas, so you're used to that human interaction. So it's great that you've actually found a way of bringing that team together. So just sort of rewinding back to sort of when you took over the reins at St Barnabas, what were you sort of first presented with in terms of these are some of the challenges or the problems that you were being asked to come in and solve?
So I think from a mission point of view, we were in a position where the charity had been, really successful startup. So we're a private members club working to break the cycle of homelessness, and it had kind of started up, and we now had people who we were successfully supporting, people who'd experienced homelessness, into jobs in hospitality and beyond. But what we were seeing was that actually people were progressing into, were getting homed in one way or another, were kind of supporting themselves into housing, and they were getting work, but actually they were still stuck in low paid, insecure housing and work. And that although our intervention was really moving them on, there was then a ceiling as to how far those people could go in terms of progressing to security. So the strategy that the House of St Barnabas has decided to take on is, how do we really work with people long term, looking at a kind of 2-year period to really get people from homelessness to being genuinely secure, where they've got not just a job, but a job that pays living wage, that gives them the security of hours that they need, to give them a home that is a home and not just they're not on the streets. So, and also to make sure they have a network and a community that means if they face challenges in the future, they've got people to support them through that. So I think the House of St Barnabas really wants to look at how do we drive forward those 3 things and work with people for long term, rather than just thinking about, a short term 6-month program, tick the box, somebody's got a job and now they move on. And we're uniquely placed really because of the way that we're funded and as a social enterprise, to really focus on kind of the quality and depth of impact rather than going for volume, because we're not reliant on contracts. What that means in terms of the business is what I inherited from my predecessor was a successful members club, doing really well, membership kind of increasing, income reasonably solid, a program supporting homeless people that was working, proven impact, but there was a kind of the profit and the purpose weren't really fully integrated. So in order to push to that next level in terms of that long-term impact, we needed to really make sure that the club was helping to deliver impact in terms of our club community being employers and mentors and part of a kind of network that's helping to deliver on this good work agenda, whether that's directly for the participants we were supporting or whether it's more broadly in terms of systems change around good work in the hospitality sector and beyond. So the challenge was really, how do you build on what's already there to amplify the impact beyond just the individuals who we're working with in program.
And I suppose because, as I say, you're running a sort of a private members club, you've got to sort of continue running the business as usual, so that the members don't notice a sort of service drop off, whilst sort of rebooting the business in terms of that longer term model. So did you draw on any sort of previous experiences then in terms of how you would go about this?
Oh, interesting. I mean, we all draw on previous experience all the time, but I think the main one is getting the right people on the bus. So we had a kind of, I think within the team, I mean, I come from a charity sector background and the team before was more from a hospitality background. So I think what we were lacking in terms of the skills in the team was a real kind of deep sense of engagement and really trying to understand our audiences across the board, and then think about how do we really use data to inform what we're doing. So I think it's probably quite a lot with startups. There's been a lot done on instinct and a lot done on let's try things, and then moving the organization into a point of maturity where actually we had a much bigger community. It was really about how do we start to get the kind of data and evidence and think about how do we test and move forward, and bringing some new skills into the team was an exciting part of that.
And in terms of that sort of data, when you got that data in front of you and you were sort of looking to make decisions around that, was there anything that sort of surprised you, or you found actually, with the data, we shouldn't have been going in this direction?
We're not quite there yet, to be honest. I mean, so I finished my 6-month objectives on the 10th of March, and on the 20th of March we closed. So that was kind of where I got to in terms of what the solution was. I think what we did do in that time was develop what we've called a change framework. You might call it a theory of change, or a kind of a model that really demonstrates how all of the different parts of the business contribute to our impact. And I think really starting to articulate what is it that we're trying to achieve, how do all of the different bits of the business contribute and integrate, was a really important, and then the kind of data falls out of that as the next level, in terms of how do we really start to understand what it is that we need to change in order to get there.
So one of the issues you've mentioned there was around sort of profit and purpose, and obviously, my members in the social housing space are trying to do sort of similar things. But for you, if you don't make a return, you don't make a profit, you can't actually sort of have any impact around that. So how hard has that sort of journey been? I mean, notwithstanding what's happened with COVID, how have you as a leader had to sort of respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think here, if profit and purpose are coherently aligned, then there shouldn't be a conflict. Certainly not in a social business context. I mean, I've certainly worked in kind of fundraising environments before where there's a risk that you're kind of fundraising for things that aren't really what you need to do because that's what people want to pay for. Actually, within a social enterprise model, you've got much more freedom on that kind of thing. And I think if the club is thriving and we have an engaged community and people are really clear about how the purpose runs through the DNA of the club, I think that will fuel our ability to deliver deeper impact and our ability to influence through the community of members that we have. So I think getting the two things aligned should mean that there isn't a conflict between the two things. I think where that becomes more difficult is when you're kind of, if you're in a kind of cutting back situation and things are siloed and it feels like you're having to make trade-offs between one and the other. But I think for us, getting to a point where everything from the food offer through to the people's experience at reception should feel kind of coherent and not preachy, but certainly aligned to the mission that we're trying to achieve.
So you finished your 6 months sort of introductory sort of plans, I suppose, and then sort of 10 days later, COVID hit. How soon did you realize how serious the impact was going to be on the business?
I think probably a little bit of me might still not have realised, because, if you go, one of the challenging things with this is if you go to the worst case scenario, there's kind of no point in carrying on, particularly in, I think if you go to actually for 2 years, no one's going to want to go out and everyone's going to be scared to socialise, then if that is the reality, then I'm not willing to accept that reality quite yet. I think in terms of realizing that things couldn't be, I think initially, so I remember the day that we closed in March, and I think we thought we were closing for a few weeks. So there was certainly that time. I remember we sat in the bar and finished off all of the half-open bottles of wine that obviously needed to be drunk before we could officially lock up. And Rishi, we were watching the announcement of Rishi Sunak announcing the furlough scheme, and I sat there and cried because the idea that there was going to be support for our staff was absolutely critical at that point. I think we thought we were talking about a few weeks. I think it's probably only in the last month when we started to get a bit more insight into what projections might look like in terms of when we may be able to reopen, which we hope will be reasonably soon in terms of July or August, but how we're able to reopen in terms of providing a members club which members feel really safe in and that provides social distancing is going to be, it is going to be a very different proposition to what we've been delivering before. So I think it's been a kind of gradual process, I'd say.
And so what were the main challenges that you were faced with? Again, you're running this sort of thriving community, doing fantastic social good, really good relationship with your customers and your members. What were the first things that sort of struck you as a leader in terms of challenges, in terms of, hang on, I've got to take some decisions here?
Yeah. I think three things. I think the first one was around, we've spent 7 years supporting individuals who've experienced homelessness into hospitality jobs. So immediately those individuals who we'd supported and who were our kind of assets who've moved on were pretty much all either furloughed, many of them with job offers, had those offers retracted. People's housing were, people who were in different situations were so immediately we had to, and we were about to start our new program for our new intake, so really just thinking actually we need to stop working with any new people, even though we know there's need and demand, and we need to completely pivot to make sure that those people who we've worked with in the past don't fall backwards. So that was kind of priority number one. I think the second thing for me personally from a leadership thing was kind of grieving for the plans we had. So I think having arrived in the business under, thinking I was here to do a certain job, had my first 6 months, which is kind of where you're learning and thinking, and then got to the end of that 6 months, kind of recruited some key new roles, had a clear strategy for the future, felt like I'd built the trust of kind of key stakeholders, and it was almost like I was just at the starting line, and suddenly, a kind of truck falls on the track. So I think personally coming to terms with the fact that all of that work, it wasn't pointless because I learned a huge amount from doing it and I'm in a much better position to lead. But a lot of the work I did just had to go on a shelf, and we had to kind of rethink quite a lot of things. And then the third thing I think, which is still the challenge, is just the absolute inability to have any precedent in terms of the assumptions and plans for the future. So we have developed a reopening strategy, which we hope to communicate towards the end of June. We've mapped our model onto the government level, so that we've imagined what our club will look like when we're at a level 3, a level 2 and a level 1, so that so that we can kind of adapt to those changes. And if we need to go backwards or forwards, we can provide clarity to our members on kind of, now we're at level 3, this is what we're offering, now we're at level 2, now we're at level 1. So I think we feel reasonably confident in what we're doing, but the reality is that the finances are, we're making assumptions around members continuing to support and engage with us, and around events happening that may prove to be, will prove to be wrong. Hopefully will prove to have been more pessimistic than we needed to, but that's challenging when there's absolutely zero precedent and you're kind of convincing trustees that we should be bold and go ahead.
And I mean, you mentioned there, as I say, about, you mentioned at the beginning about, one of the benefits of the lockdown has been actually your team is probably closer than ever around this. But are there any personal benefits that you've, come to view about the lockdown? You think, actually, I don't particularly want to go back to that because I'm enjoying these elements. Are there any, upsides to the crisis?
I would say, other than that, feeling close to the team, and I guess the other one is, for me, I will certainly feel a lot more personal ownership of the house when we reopen. There's something about this has kind of accelerated my. I'm someone who takes ownership and responsibility, obviously, and I'm chief exec, but we're kind of redesigning every little bit of the business. So by having gone through that process, you're less the kind of chief exec in their first year who's inherited and is still learning, and more, I feel like I'll have, so I've also been coming into the building regularly on my own and doing all the building check. We've got a listed building, so kind of looking after the building, and I feel like I know the business, I've kind of have an intimacy with the building and the business in a way that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Otherwise, no, I think it's absolutely shit, all of it. And there is absolutely zero benefit to my life personally of anything coming out of lockdown. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, it's really made me realize I live on my own and don't have any outdoor space. So I'm certainly not one of those people who's been like, oh, I've realized that I can enjoy my garden, spend time with my family. I'm definitely more in the get me to the disco, who's going to have a cocktail with me kind of camp, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your dream job, sort of running a membership club in that sort of scenario then. But I mean, just picking up on that point in terms of your own sort of personal well-being, is there anything that you are now doing that to actually look after yourself as a leader? Because you can't lead other people if you're not in the right space. Is there anything from a personal perspective that you're now doing to look after yourself?
I mean, I think it's all of the things that are true in kind of normal life, making sure exercise, and making sure that you've got a kind of peer support network. So obviously Akivo is brilliant in terms of the peer support. I'm also in an action learning set, and we've kind of stepped up the frequency of our action learning set meetings, which are normally kind of 4 times a year, and we've been doing them about every 6 weeks, and that's been hugely helpful, drawing on that kind of peer network of other people in similar situations, and realizing I do think in some ways leading through this has been easier. So when I was a gingerbread, I led a restructure that was 2/3 of the organisation being made redundant, and it was a complete pivot in terms of the strategic direction of the organisation away from service delivery and towards kind of systems change. And this feels much less personal. I think leading in a context where there is a clear external bad guy is in some ways easier than making an argument that actually what people have been doing hasn't been the best way to deliver impact. And so I think there's definitely something for you to unite by, and everybody understands what's happening. Often the biggest challenge with leading change is getting people to understand the need for change, and you don't have to do that right now. It's just like, here's a bad thing, we need to go this way. So I certainly think it's not the most challenging leadership context I've been in for that reason.
Really interesting perspective, that, Rosie. And sort of final question then, really, if you were sort of going to share one personal experience or, bit of sort of advice from your career as a leader, what would that be to viewers? What would you like to sort of leave them with?
Good questions. I think for me, where I've succeeded most is where I've been able to be fully myself. And I think I've always thrived in environments where kind of I felt comfortable, and certainly coming to this sounds a bit pompous, but like where people want to be led by me. And actually that I think that kind of culture and fit, it's easy to think that as a chief exec, when you're in a leadership role, you're in a position to change culture, but you're really not. And I think leading a culture that fits with your personal values and personality is so much easier than trying to lead an environment that jars with your norms. So I think finding the right fit and finding a place that wants you is the thing that I've found most helpful in terms of being where I've been able to be most successful.
Well, I think, from somebody who's sort of frequented the house for many years, you genuinely come across to me as somebody who has found that right space. So yeah. I appreciate how difficult it is. I wish you all the very, very best with the reopening, and you can get back to some sort of normality and continue doing the great work that the House of St Barnabas does.
Thank you, and I hope to see you here for a cocktail in the not too distant future.